Welcome everyone to the second year of Island Forum 240. It's so nice to see all of you here. Thank you for coming. My name is Karen Yancey, and I am the president of the Washington Island Observer. The Observer is the sponsor of these forums, along with the Washington Island Ferry Line and the TPAC. And so we want to thank our sponsors now. One of the roles of the newspaper is to foster discussion on issues of the day. Last year, we heard from experts on 3 issues important to the future of the island: school funding, economic development, and the island environment. From these discussions, we learned that the island's government needs to develop a long-term plan for the island, perhaps as far out as 2040, to address some of the concerns that came out of these forums last year: school funding, the need for more affordable housing, better support for local businesses, and the importance of taking care of our beautiful island environment, particularly by removing invasive species that have begun to invade our forests and our fields. I was really pleased earlier this year when 2 island summer residents stepped up to pay the fee for joining the Bay Lake Plan Commission, which is the Northeast Wisconsin Regional Commission that develops long-range plans for communities. So as far as I know, when talking with Hans Lux and the board, they do plan to proceed with applying for a grant to begin developing this plan. And as many of you know, living on the island, we have so many new issues that have come up in the last few years, and it's very important that we have a plan moving forward to help address many of these issues. So this year we are continuing with discussions on the future of culture on the island, the future of the island churches, and there have actually now been 5 people who want to participate in that discussion in August, and then we will also be doing one on island agriculture in September, and I have a couple other suggestions from people, so we'll see how those develop over the summer. Tonight, I am pleased to introduce Mark Nierenhausen, who is not a stranger to many of you. He is currently president and CEO of the Hennepin Theater Trust in Minneapolis. Mark has a very impressive and long resume of leadership positions in art organizations, from serving out as the founding director and professor of the Janlow Art Leadership Program at Syracuse University, and also as president of the AT&T Performing Arts Center in Dallas. And those are just a few of the many leadership positions he has taken around the country. Many of you will also know him because he is the son of Chester Nierenhausen, who was the longtime pastor at Trinity Lutheran Church here on the island. Joining him is we are fortunate to have George, and I'm going to ask you for your help in your last name. Subros, who is the executive director of the Wisconsin Arts Board in Madison, the state agency which nurtures creating and cultural expression and promotes the arts. Having him here has been wonderful. We just all had dinner together and learning about some of the grant programs and some of the things that the state does to promote the arts and can help us on the island is really something I think that everyone will be interested in tonight. And he will be following Mark in presenting. I also want to thank the 2 graduate students we have here, and everybody's giving me these difficult names tonight. So, Mariana, right here, and Olivia. Oh, okay. So Mariana was really the one that was instrumental in probably talking with some of you here to sort of do a survey of island cultural organizations and, ask you some questions about how you saw your future moving forward. So thank you for doing that. And then we also have our 4 distinguished panelists tonight. And again, I have all these difficult names. So I'm going to start with Julian Hagen, who is the managing director of TPAC, and as many of you know, has been instrumental in leading the much of the music that has been created and performed on the island for many years, along with Dan Hansen, who I see there in the audience. And then Ann Young, who is with the Sievers School for the Arts, and she is a owner. And I think what's really interesting to have Ann with us tonight is we think of arts organizations as 501c3s, but some of them are, businesses and bring a whole different perspective to what the future of arts will be on the island. And then we have Deb Budninsky. And I apologize, I just met Deb tonight, so I'm still trying to learn her name, but she is right now president of the Art and Nature Center. Wonderful to have you here, Deb. And then we also have another person, Charles. David, thank you. And David Schwant, who I also just met tonight, and we are thrilled to have all four of you here. And we're going to proceed. Mark is going to present some of the results of his research and some of his thoughts about the future of arts on the island. And then George will also jump in as well and make some comments. So Mark, can you join us here on stage? Thank you so much.
Strange being here at this time, thinking about the Red Barn and how this all started. And it's fun being here because it's great having colleagues from the Bowles Center program at the University of Wisconsin with George and Mariana. I can honestly say that I'm here doing exactly what I did when I was 17 years old. It's just on a little bit different scale. I'm at the head of the theater trust, but I'm still running the Red Barn in my mind. It's just got more seats and bigger shows and fancier lighting system, but nothing has changed. And the perspective that we want to talk about here tonight is really the perspective of the Red Barn and GPAC and the arts organizations here. Everything that I'm bringing here tonight, everything that I'm here with my colleagues tonight, is really nothing more than all of us already know and already experience, and that is that the arts are important and the arts matter. And I want to talk a little bit though, I just want to frame things. I'm really not the person that's going to do the talking tonight. It's really about how we think about the arts. Deb and I were talking at dinner and she talked about asset management, and when we talk about the arts, we always think about, that when Julian sings Northern Lights, it just moves me, or when I'm at the music festival or the writers conference. And that's how the arts affect us as individuals. What we're here tonight is to talk about the arts as an industry. And that's kind of anathema to a lot of people. It's like, well, this is the arts and we shouldn't talk in business terms. But, as Deb was saying, that communities have to leverage their assets. And if we don't understand the role that the arts play as an asset on the island, as something that shapes who we are now, that communicates to people who we are, and will help determine who we are in the future, we're really missing an opportunity. So I'm assuming that we all love the arts, but this isn't about loving art as an individual. This is about understanding the impact that the arts have on our communities and the future. And so as Karen said, when she was talking about the environment, this is about the cultural environment, the people environment. The arts affect education. We were talking about that. Karen mentioned that. When we talk about how it affects future economic development, who is going to live on the island? Why are they going to live here? What is their experience going to be? All of that comes down to the art and the arts and culture. And it's not about what show the music festival books or what's on the program, or it's not about who Dan has performing at the Red Barn, but it's about the collective impact of all of these things. So when we talk about the arts and culture, what we're really talking about, we want to talk about what do they mean for the community, what do they mean for the future of Washington Island, and what policies can we use? And George is here to really speak to the future because of the experience of the Wisconsin State Arts Board and what other agencies do. So just to frame things before I turn it over to everyone else, when we talk about arts and culture, what we're talking about really is about creativity. And it's not just creativity in the arts, but it's a creative mindset. And increasingly in this economic environment, what matters is people who are creative, who can solve problems. And that goes beyond writing a song. It goes to how we think about the world and how we approach things. It's about communicating who we are. You know, growing up on the island, I have such vivid memories, you know, all of us who've grown up here know this, that it's like, oh, those people just come to the island. But then there are people that understand the island. It's like, oh yeah, they get it. They feel like they're part of the island. Well, how do people feel like they're part of the island? How do they know who we are? How do they know what we stand for? Well, it's the arts and culture that communicate that. It's being part of the Scandinavian Festival. It's singing Northern Lights at the Red Barn. You know, it's being here at TPAC and seeing, you know, the island players. It's how we share with others. You know, the arts on the island, the thing that I've learned and you know, being involved in the business and presenting major Broadway shows and all this stuff, Hamilton is a wonderful show, Wicked is a wonderful show. But that's not the same as sharing the arts experience with other people. It's not the same as sitting outside of the Red Barn, looking at the Northern Lights and singing Northern Lights. That's who we are as people. And so it's that sharing, it's the collective effort of being part of the island by being part of the island players. And the other thing that I want to stress when we talk about the arts and culture, it's not just the music festival, it's not just the fine arts. It's a barbecue festival. It's the triathlon. It's the Bluegrass Festival that just happened. It's not just the high-end fine arts. It's all of those things that talk about who we are and what we say to other people. So again, we're going to focus on the impact of the arts in the terms of the sense of community, civic engagement, economic engagement, and specifically tourism. So just to recap, so the arts build community. The arts identify who we are. They tell other people, they tell the people that come to the island that know nothing about us other than, oh, those stones at Schoolhouse Beach are really cool. It tells them what it means to live here, what it means to touch island life a little bit. And this is how we tell other people who we want to be known as. So the Scandinavian Festival isn't just a performance. That's how we tell the world what our values are. It's the collective impression to other people of what it means to be an islander, what it means to be here, what makes the island different than Ephraim and Fish Creek and Sister Bay. So the arts are the way of getting people involved. The thing that makes the island different is people are involved in the island. So we can't put on island players or the music festival or the Red Barn or any of these things without people being involved. And people work together for common goals. And it doesn't matter what show is on this stage. What matters is that people work together to put a show on this stage. And that's the impact of the arts that we want to talk about. It builds a sense of community. It takes it away from being, this is the place where I have a summer home, to this is the community that I'm part of. And it's real economic impact. It is real dollars. The arts aren't just a nice to have thing. And you'll hear George talk about this later. You'll hear Mariana talk about it. The arts are dollars and cents. We don't see it often because we deal with, it's the Red Barn that has a small budget and it's a couple dollars a night. And we go to the Art and Nature Center and it's $1 or $2 for admission there. We don't put it all together, but if we looked at all of the arts groups on the island as one business, it's one of the largest businesses on the island. It's one of the largest single employers on the island. And the economic impact, the direct economic impact is tremendous. And the implied economic impact in terms of bringing people to the island and keeping them here is huge. With tourists alone, we know that cultural tourists, people that come for cultural events, stay longer and spend more money than the people that just want to ride the Sherry train and see the sights. That means real dollars in everyone's pockets. We know that arts are what make people want to retire here. And in this day and age of remote work, it's going to be the difference between people saying, I want to work remotely on the island and spend my money here and send my kids to school here. So the arts are not just a nice to have, they're a need to have on the island. And so with that, that's how we want to look at the arts here. That's what I want us to take away as we think about this discussion. And to give a little bit more documentation about the scope and scale, I want to have Mariana come up. As you heard, Mariana is also a graduate from the Bowl Center at the University of Wisconsin, a fellow alum, colleague, friend, and so Mariana, take it away.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. My mouse doesn't quite travel to the screen. But anyways, so to kind of give an initial context here. So Door County drives a ton of tourism. This isn't news really to anyone, but the exciting part of this is the amount of arts-focused drive that tourism. There's 57 artist studios, organizations, gallery spaces, all within Door County. And if you think about the number of organizations that exist on the island, there's actually a high percentage of those 57 identified areas that exist here. And so in 2015, 300 people were full-time employees of arts and cultural organizations within Door County as a whole. And on the next slide, you'll see that another decent percentage of that exists here on the island. So the sort of figures that you see related to Door County are really transferable to the island itself as well. And kind of the exciting piece that Mark was mentioning before about the spending power of these tourists. In 2015, in fiscal year 2015, it was identified that all of the events related arts and culture spending, apart from the tickets to those sort of events, was about $77 per person per day, I believe. And so, given the survey results, thank you to all of those that participated in that survey, we had about a 40% response rate, and given that we learned quite a few interesting things. I think one of the most exciting pieces of this in relation to what Mark was saying about retiring and the retiree population on the island is that 60% of the respondents noted that 50 or more volunteers were working throughout the year. And we know that the demographic of volunteers is oftentimes in the retiree age. So by bringing more of that population to the island, there's already an active space for them to participate in. And we see that noted here. And also, we see that from the findings we have, the total annual patronage of these respondents being 24,000, with annual revenues totaling over 500,000. And so when we look at the broader number, I did a little bit of estimation here. So we see that it's really driving over $1 billion in revenue through the island then. And we also see within these respondents, there was, this was an equivalency to more than 24 full-time jobs. Do you want to talk about this too, or you want to? Oh, sure, wonderful. Okay, so, and now thinking about how this impacts the island specifically, there's a really exciting moment in which economic development is changing. There's really tangible evidence that shows that, as you saw, there's additional spending that surrounds arts and culture. It's to the restaurants and accommodations. It's not just to those arts and culture activations themselves. And as I noted earlier, the retiree population is an important part of the island. And given the spending power and the volunteerism, there's really a direct connection between the arts and that group to participate in the culture of the island. And another interesting aspect of this too is the changing of work right now. You're definitely seeing a lot of cities having a bit of a flight, if you will, in the wake of remote work, and people are really able to work anywhere. And so having these sort of cultural elements are really attractive qualities as well. Wonderful. And so then that goes back into the tourism aspect. And as we've noted, there's a lot of attendees that come to the island for these arts and cultural elements themselves, direct tourism, and these experiences aren't just for the tourists themselves. It's a way for year-long residents, summertime residents to really identify and come together with the identity of the island. And it also creates a sense of participation as a tourist themselves. So by engaging in these really intentional arts and culture experiences, you get a real sense of experiencing the island and making meaningful connections versus just being a day tripper and not really getting a sense of the culture which you're participating in. Great. And so with that, we'll bring out George. Well, maybe, Mark, do you want any other remarks?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So I want to call attention to some of the remarks that Mariana just made because they bear repeating. And it goes back to what I said earlier about everything I know about arts management I learned at the Red Barn. So she was talking about economic impact. And I remember when Kniff's owned the shipyard, and after the Red Barn was closed, we'd all go over to Sailor's Pub and drink beer. That's economic impact. That's the additional spending. A more benign way would be when we'd always go to breakfast at sunset and talk about, oh, there are all the people from Seavers there. That was probably a little bit better example than us drinking beer late at night after the Red Barn at the shipyard. But the fact is that number that Mariana talked about, 24,000 people going to the activities on the island. That's not just a number, that's not just 24,000. Those are people that are spending additional money. And we don't see it as art spending. Instead, we look at it and go, oh, well, the restaurants did well that night, the bars did well that night, the ferry line had more people. But all of that is economic impact on the island. The other part that bears repeating is the slide right before this. She talked about arts being an attractor and an attraction. And that's a little bit of a nuanced thing, but there's the attraction element in that, I'm coming to the island to go to the Bluegrass Festival. And those kind of things matter. I'm coming to the island for the music festival or for the barbecue festival or whatever. But the arts also make a statement. They're an attractor. They tell people this is the kind of place that you will feel welcome. This is the kind of place you will feel at home. This is the kind of place you want to retire. And the really profound thing was the opportunity that we have is when we think about remote work now, where people can work from anywhere. And I experienced it myself. It wasn't that long ago that I had to be at my theaters every day of the week. I could barely get up the island. Now I can sit here for 2 weeks at a time and manage my theaters remotely. And you multiply that by many people, by many families working at their law firm, working at their marketing agency. That's the equivalent of what years ago we wanted to think about when we said, well, what kind of business can we start on the island? We don't need to start businesses. We just need to attract people that are already in business because we will capture their spending power. Their kids will be in our schools. They will volunteer for our organizations. That is what's going to make the island stronger. But we want those people to feel they are part of the island, that they understand the island, that they're not just coming here to work, but they are coming here to be part of the community. And the arts push all of those buttons. They're the reason why people want to be here. They're the reason that people, when they are here, are part of the community. And that's going to be an economic impact in the future that goes far beyond how many people showed up at WIC Festival and how many tickets did they buy. This is not something that's new to us. This is something that is being experienced around the state in small communities around the state, in other islands around the state. And we're extraordinarily fortunate to have the executive director of the State Arts Board, friend, colleague, fellow classmate, George Subers here, who can talk to us and tell us that we're not doing this alone. This is something that other people are doing. There are resources, there are ways of thinking about this. So George, please.
So, George Subers, Wisconsin Arts Board, here to say, imagination is in the space. People on this island decided they were going to have a thing called the True Blood Center, right? So, Mark kept saying beyond the performances is a community coming together to build something like this, to encourage their kids in the arts, to see world-class artists come by, to express yourselves, getting on the stage, whether you're singing, dancing, whatever you're doing. So it's a really important thing to say. Imagination is already alive and well on the island, and it's tangible in the ways we look at things, whether it's the organizations or the artists you all know here. I wanted to start by saying, if you don't know, the Wisconsin Arts Board is a 15-member board appointed by the governor. The Arts Board will be 50 years old next year, which is an amazing stat. We'd like to hear about that. And it's all about, for us, the 4 C's. It's about creativity, culture, community, and commerce. We have a really nice mission statement, there it is, but it does break down to the 4 C's: creativity, culture, community, and commerce. People know us as a grant maker, and we still do that, thank God. Knock on wood, the money's still there. But in addition to that, what we are is, we provide information, we provide technical assistance, we provide connection, we provide research, and we provide the opportunity to be Johnny Appleseeds of the arts. So what do I mean by that? We come to a community, we hear your stories, and guess what? We're going to tell those stories somewhere else down the line. And in fact, this week it's really important because on Friday in Amory, Wisconsin, over here, we're going to have the 30+ Rural Arts Forum. So people coming from small communities around the state to talk about what it is they're doing in their communities, bragging about them, we hope, although we're not so good at bragging in the Midwest, but they're going to brag a little. They'll also talk about some of the challenges that they face and how they made it through COVID, which is really important. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Rural Forum in a minute, but I want to go back and just say, the Arts Board should not be an abstract concept to you, because Brian Kelsey, the head of the Peninsula Players, is now our board chair. So you have a direct Door County connection to the Arts Board. He's been serving on the board for a while. He also served on the Governor's Council on Tourism, so he's got the arts and tourism together. But if you're looking for a direct pipeline into the work of the Arts Board, Brian's going to be your guy. And just to put up our rural bona fides a little bit more, our vice chair is from Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin. So we are in that rural space by choice, because we believe the arts are alive and well, not just in Madison and Milwaukee, but all throughout the state of Wisconsin. Mark was hitting on the numbers, and Mariana, if you got that slide. So the Bureau of Economic Analysis of the U.S. Department of Commerce has been doing what they call an Arts and Culture Production Services account, satellite account. They do it for the nation, and then they do it for Wisconsin. And I just want to point out a couple numbers, because most people can't believe it when I say it, but you should see this. The value added, the economic impact of the arts in Wisconsin is $9.6 billion. Okay, I didn't say million, I said billion. That's not a number people think about. You say billion in the arts and they're like, really? And do we say it because it's all about the money? No, what we say is, and as Mark has been saying, this is not a charity we're talking about, right? This is a good for our community. But this is not Oliver Twist with the nonprofit arts organizations saying, please, sir, may we have some more? But rather, when you're contributing to businesses or the nonprofits, because this is both nonprofits and commercial spaces, you're contributing to the bottom line of the community and to the state. What's interesting about this number is the arts and culture outpace a number of other industries that you know and love, like the construction industry. Again, do people know that that's true? But what's nice about this is it's not the arts people saying it. It's the world's preeminent economics shop saying this. The other thing I think that's interesting is that 83,000 people in the state of Wisconsin call the arts and creativity their business. And again, I don't know that we would have all thought together that there were that many people working in this field, but they are. And so again, it's not only about the money, but it's about the money in this respect, because it is in a conversation with policymakers where they think they can pat the arts on the head and say, you're really cute, but go over there. We'll do the real work now. In reality, the real work is here, because it's the shows, but it's the way of thinking. And I guess I want to underscore that as well. We're about imagination, creativity, and innovation, right? So when we think about imagination, creativity, and innovation, the example I like to use is ethanol. Love it, hate it, but think about this. Somebody had to look at an ear of corn and imagine that something could come of that, right? And so the creativity came when somebody said about trying to make ethanol with that. The innovation comes when somebody decides either we're going to make more ethanol out of fewer bushels, or we're going to use biomass, or we're going to use rice, or we're going to use some other form of that. But my point in all of this is that it's the way of thinking. And so as City Council sits down with the challenges of the day, and we have all kinds of challenges in our communities across the state, the arts have a role to play to helping solve those problems, right? And I don't know that often the artists are being invited to the table. The artists need to be showing up at the table to help think differently about what needs to happen in our communities. I gave Mark an example today when we were having lunch, and it was this: in Milwaukee, they have bus shelters. Okay, everybody's got a bus shelter. What do you do with that bus shelter? In that particular case, the arts and students made murals to talk about gun violence on those bus shelters. So the bus shelters became something. Sometimes it's just purely an architectural thing. So it's not just a rectangle with some plexiglass, but an artist looks at that and makes it into something. And that something, to your point, gives us a sense of place. It's not just a thing, it's a thing we made here to reflect our community. So I want to talk rural. In Wisconsin, we have the claim to fame that the very first book on the arts and the small community was written in Wisconsin. In fact, it was the very first application to the National Endowment for the Arts for local arts development in the 1960s. Anybody ever heard of the man Robert Gard? So many of you have heard of him. Robert Gard, if you haven't, was a professor at the University of Wisconsin, actually in the ag department. But he was a theater professor, and he and his colleagues in the arts, in dance, in poetry and writing, etc., traveled the state as part of the Wisconsin idea to deliver to folks the notion that you too can write, you too can sing, etc. But that book, The Arts in the Small Community, has been used throughout the United States as a way to take the arts and make them central to communities and give them the heartbeat that they really need. So we have to be proud of that. We have to be proud of that in Wisconsin. Mark noted about islands. So I've been at the Arts Board for now 30 years. 25 as its director. And when we first started in 1992 with an idea that was to make things in the rural spaces and the urban spaces, local arts, communicate to the communities that they were in. And so one of those communities was Madeline Island, and so it was the LaPointe Center on Madeline Island. Stop me if you've heard this before. You know, on this island, they have people who come during the summertime, right? And then they have people who live there the rest of the year. And part of it was, how do we connect these people together when we're all together on the island? And part of it was, we need something to do beyond going to Tom's Bird Down Bar during the winter, right? So the LaPointe Center is a local arts agency that's taking on a number of different kinds of art. So it's the visual arts, and they do gallery things. They do performances. They've got a children's theater that works through them. They have a film society where they watch films together, etc. So the Arts Board in that role plays the role of convening and helping people start to think about what it is they'd like to do in their community. And then we have a program called the Wisconsin Regranting Program that gives money to encourage that. But the interesting thing about that program is it gives money to the community, which it matches, and it stays there, and the community decides who gets it. Not Madison, but the local community. So many parallels, I would think, and an opportunity for you to share stories with your friends on Madeline Island. And I'll stop talking with this thought. The Rural Arts Forum, which is happening Friday, is really an opportunity for peer-to-peer learning. Except you've got this really wonderful thing where you've got the director of the Arts Board and the local arts person from the Arts Board. You've got the head of now what's called Create Wisconsin, used to be called Arts Wisconsin, now Create Wisconsin. You've got the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation's Office of Rural Prosperity. And the conversations have been going since they started that office between the Arts Board and the Office of Rural Prosperity. Because the folks at WEDC understand that the arts have a role to play, whether it's the beautifying of main streets or events that bring people to rural communities. They understand that the arts have a role to play. So the person from the Office of Rural Prosperity will be there. So again, peer learning and also these resources that are coming together. My guess is that in the coming years, that event will move around a bit because the person who's been running it is coming to the end of his, at the end of his run, he'll retire soon. And so it will move out of that community. But the most important thing for you to know is it happens every year, and it would be great to see Washington Island as part of that. And I'll leave it there because we want to hear from the panel. So thank you.
Well, thank George for taking the time to come up the island and share those kind of things, because it's an important connection that we sometimes forget how connected we are and the similarities. And George said something really important about the arts having a place at the table. As we're thinking about the future of the island, this conversation and the points that we're trying to establish today are not about us supporting the arts. It's about how we ask the arts to support the island, how we ask the arts to support the future of the island, how we ask the arts to think about having a seat at the table as we determine what our future is, rather than having our future determined for us. And the arts have more power than we realize. We have more responsibility than we realize also. And it's both a change, it requires a change in the way we in the arts think about our role in the community. But again, to Deb's conversation that I had with her at dinner tonight, it's also the community understanding the arts not as a charity that requires support, but as an asset that needs to be exploited, taken advantage of, utilized to benefit the larger community. And I would encourage everyone to get involved with Wisconsin State Arts Board to learn what those connections are, not just the funding connections, but the rural conference. And I think we've already seen the benefit of that. Sarah and Jim, when they were running the Red Barn, had Amos Zook here to do a neon art installation. And I met Amos at, I think it was one of the very first rural arts conferences. So we know that the Rural Arts Conference means a lot to the island. We just got to perpetuate that. And so I just want to thank everyone. I know we're going to turn over the panel for their thoughts and discussions, and Karen's going to moderate that. So again, thanks to Mariana, and thanks to George for being here, and thanks for everyone here to care about the arts. And Karen, thank you.
Thank you to both Mark, Mariana, and George. It was just opened my eyes to a lot of things that I didn't think about when I thought about the arts on the island. Tonight, to sort of foster or continue the discussion, we've asked each of the 4 members on our panel to ask questions of the speakers. And so, Mark and George, you might want to come back up here because it's really you who need the microphone. And we can start with Julian.
Come on, Julian, you're always shy.
I know growing up here on the island, arts, just for myself, was always so important because there really wasn't a whole lot to do up here. Mark, we were all in high school together, and I think there were, I don't know, not many students in the school, not enough for a basketball team, football. There were enough, but not many. Everybody knew what basketball was or football. So that said, my dad had 3 guitar chords, and we learned to sing with him. So it was so ingrained in me that it took a long time to understand. I always knew arts were important, but now the job here at my young age, I'm seeing how the arts themselves within each organization were conduits, and I may have a question, I don't know. But how, early on growing up here was kind of territorial. I mean, our nature center didn't go to the Red Barn, where they were all fighting for the same money as I remember, at least anyway. But now I've come to understand that I think there are 30 different organizations like soccer and Little League and all these different things, but they all can grow together. Like the Hennepin, they decided the theaters, instead of competing, they're working together, that there is a place for everybody. And I think these kinds of thought processes, it is a reprogramming. That this is being recorded tonight to be shown on the YouTube channel and to be shared in whatever way you want here. So that Dave Sneeze was just recorded for Facebook. But so it's been an education for me just to reprogram part of this. And another example is Pat McDonald, when he came into Sturgeon Bay and started Steel Bridge, certainly had some real credit in the music world, but he loved Sturgeon Bay, and one person can change the world in so many ways, and he got the ball rolling. Certainly having a friend Jackson Brown doesn't hurt, but he has done it not to monetize it, but he really has done it to help the community in so many ways. So I've been trying to, went up to talk. There's little things we all can do, like the Mercantile. I went up to the Mercantile and said that you have an island corner. I mean, I've got things from China and all other places, but I said, would you just have a corner just for island, like Mike Malaki spatulas and people knit in the island honey? And they said they would do it, but of course the next dangerous thing is the follow through. So all these different arts things like us, we do need volunteers also to help us out here to achieve these goals. It's far more than giving money to the theater, but it's volunteers and good words. And having people spend more money, at least I do anyway. And I think music helps add to that happiness. So one more thought, and I'm not going to kill the battery here. I talked to a lady on Madeline Island a number of years ago about what they were doing up there. And so we don't have to make a new mousetrap in any of these things. It's really going to, the Red Barn overlay kind of presents itself, and so do other theaters. So I'm gonna be talking to, once COVID, I can do it by phone. It's nice to go visually be there. But I'm so grateful for the arts board. Brian Kelsey's a friend, and he's so accessible. He's so quick to respond. I could learn some messages on that. I know Karen, I could respond more promptly. But, and Mark's been a godsend for being on the theater board here. Don't see him a lot, but he's always available. And that's, so the arts, I guess I don't have a question.
I got a question for everyone here. I mean, the first thing is you 4 chords now instead of 3 chords, Julian, so you progressed over the years.
I remember the first day my father knew 3 chords, and the day he learned E minor, he was playing guitar, his thumpy, 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 it was like a compound bows and string, compound bow and arrow and string. He turned to me and played at E minor. Anyway, but yeah, we had so much fun. So yeah.
So let me ask the panel this, because it's really easy to talk about the arts as a collective, but the fact is everyone has got day-to-day business needs. We gotta keep the doors open, we gotta sell tickets, we gotta get people in the doors. And George is talking about $9 billion worth of business in the state, and Mariana's talking about over $1 million economic impact. But the problem is, at the end of the day, the arts are still all separate. So what's your message to the island? I mean, if we sit there and say we're thinking about the future and the island needs to think about the arts as a thing to have a seat at the table, what would that seat at the table look like, for the arts to be part of the island future planning? I mean, what does that invitation look like? How do you know that you're being invited to be part of the planning?
I always have thoughts. I just think, I know for a while there was the Washington Island Arts Board. Is that still going? I mean, I'm so out of touch with this because I should know this, but again, it's strength and safety in numbers. And I think we could do a lot more to work together. Not that one person shouldn't have a seat at the table, but having a number of organizations working together and not only competing, I think that would help us a lot.
I'm Deb Vishnevsky from I'm president of the board of the Art Nature Center. And I wanted to comment on a couple of things. Something Julian said about how organizations are more aware and working together. And I see that happening. I mean, I see that happening with the Art and Nature Center. We just had a board meeting yesterday, and we were talking about our scheduled programming for the summer. And our scheduled programming includes things like, the pop-up concert for the music festival. And we're gonna have, we're hoping to have a book session, partnering with Deb from the bookstore. So we're looking at opportunities. We're very aware, we're looking at opportunities. And I know a lot of the groups are also looking at working with the school. And that was gonna be my question, actually, was, we talk a lot about the retirees on the island, and they contribute a lot in terms of both finances and volunteer time. In fact, I told myself I was gonna put a plug in here, a big thank you, because I became president of the board last fall, and within about a week after I became president of the board of the Art and Nature Center, we found out that the nature room floor was gonna collapse at any moment. And if 50 people jumped all at once, it was over. In that space. And since that time, it has been amazing, the support we've gotten from this community. I mean, not only financial support, and we've certainly gotten that both from like the town board, but as well as people, renewing or taking on memberships, contributing, throwing spare change in the jar at Vans. I mean, it's been like everything you can imagine. Financially, but it's also been volunteers, people stepping up and helping with stuff and helping us figure out things and coming and looking at what is actually going on in under that floor. And And then, and just the encouragement and moral support, because this is not an easy thing. It's a little scary that the floor could have collapsed in a minute. So it's really, it really touched us all very deeply, the support we got from this community. And so as I think about moving forward, we have the retirees and we have, some of the families that, are here that you talked about, people moving here. But I really want to think about the youth. I want to think about how do we engage youth in ways that are meaningful to them so that it's not just the retirees, it's not just us older folks that are engaged with the arts, but how do we work with our youth and maybe collaboratively with some of the other arts organizations around youth stuff. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
So I think that's brilliant because that is the future. And I also think part of the challenge is giving students more than you expect they can handle. I'll give you an example. We still do have a sister state relationship with Chiba, Japan. And when we were in Chiba, we were watching a performing opportunity with the youth, and they played for 9 minutes with no music. And it was the littlest kid to the high school kid. And we would never have expected our kids to be able to handle it. And yet they expected it of them and they followed through with it. And so project-based learning is a big thing right now. So how can you structure projects where the kids get real world experience? Look, Mr. Narenhausen over here talks about sweeping up the red barn and getting involved and presenting from that moment and going on and now working all in the future in that same business. So how can the organizations, the artists, structure opportunities for the students to get involved where the kids could probably earn credit? They can get bitten by the bug of service and everybody wins. So I think about that.
I think that one of the other answers to a lot of these questions too is to not think about it as the arts. It's not about, you're at the table because you're part of education, or you're at the table because you're part of tourism. And so often in the arts, we want people to see us as, well, we're the arts, when the table we're at is the education table. So it's not about how do we get kids involved in the arts through education, it's how do we use the arts to get kids even more involved in education. And that shift, because I think in our business, we're so used to asking for money and making it about ourselves, that oddly enough, it's sometimes hard to make it about others, and having to use that explicit language is sort of the starting point. I mean, one of the questions I want to ask is, Anne, you're in a little bit different, we got all the nonprofits here and we talk about the arts, and yet one of the oldest arts organizations on the island is Sievers, and in so many areas, I mean, that could be a business, that could be a nonprofit, and what's the difference? And I mean, how do you guys think of yourself in this context of arts and culture? Do you ever think of the business as a cultural enterprise, or is it, and what do you hear from the people that come to Sievers? I mean, over the years, people, they come back every year and they love the island, and what started out as, I want to learn how to do fiber arts has become, I fall in love with the island. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the power of culture to introduce people to the island.
I certainly will. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. You pretty much gave me the question, and I can give you the answer because I can share a little bit of the Sievers story. Some of you may have known the founder of Sievers. He was a gentleman who was 79 years old. His name was Walter Schutz. Yet in the 1960s, before the start of the school, Walter designed the island map with promotional slogans of north of the tension line and a magical place. In his own words, Walter said, "I never had the intention of setting up a fiber arts school. It just came to me in a flash that it would be a nice thing to do, and I just did it." 40 plus years later, the impact on the island community that we have seen at the Fiber Arts School is an overall registered enrollment of 20,000 students taught by 190 instructors in 2,500 classes. During an average 5-day class session, the choices of on-island lodging establishments, restaurants, grocery, shops, and other services welcome the 20 or more students, many with their families. In selecting classes, the teachers and students coordinate with island cultural events such as the August Music Festival, TPAC performances, Scandinavian Dance Festival, the Bird Festival, the Literary Festival, Island Players, Art Association for classes, and much more. Seavers has 6 employees for full-time or part-time seasonal positions and 4 full-time year-round. We have been finding that 80% of the students are returning each year for another class. Some have been coming for 20 years or more. Students and teachers have traveled from every state, 10 foreign countries, and several Canadian provinces. Over 90 families have become property owners, purchased, remodeled, or built a new home and became permanent residents. Sharing some of the class evaluations tell us of their island experience. Peaceful. People know my name. Learning. Relaxing. So welcomed and cared for. Entertained and inspired by creative folks. A place to keep coming back to. The island sparkles with the atmosphere of another era. Doing something nice for myself. Again, a quote from Walter Schutz in 1980, the second year of classes. And he said, "We're slowly beginning to develop. And perhaps, who knows, in 20 to 30 years from now, we might have something real nice."
This quotation came true. You had something that's real.
So I guess my question would be, how do I find somebody like a Walter Schutz to come up with an idea for a music school or a photography school or things like that?
Well, first of all, you just put it out to the universe, it's being recorded, so there may be somebody out there, maybe somebody in this room. But I do think if you get that out there in the right circles, you will attract people here who want to do it. I mean, the music festival, those players have been coming up here for years because they found this place years ago. So let's talk about which kinds of music schools you want to do, because Madeline Island, we'll go back to that. They've got the music camp, but they also have the Madeline Island Art School, which is not only happening on the island, but in Tucson, Arizona, and Santa Fe as well. So these kind of great entrepreneurial ideas, and they probably wouldn't have called them that at the beginning, but that's what they are wonderful. And so let's talk about the music piece. We might find somebody out there.
It's really astounding, and I remember going down to Walter's house watching TV with Nancy and all, and things like that, and it was really exciting because he had a color TV and it was really exciting. Went out to Nancy's grandfather and watched color TV. But made me realize what a visionary Walter was, but also what a profound impact and the data that you had about the impact of Seavers. But, we look at the thinking behind that. I mean, the data that you talked about shows a way of thinking about the awareness of why Seavers matters. Whether I like fiber arts or not, I can appreciate those other things. So if we switch to something very newer, David, with a TPAC, the challenge here is this is a relatively new organization, and it's still, as I'm very aware, and Julian is aware, we're still trying to find out what the place is in the community. So, here we've got a 40-year-old example, and now you with your involvement. How should the community think about an institution like this? What is the role of this institution in terms of the next 20 years? The next, what do we want to be able to say about TPAC in 40 years? When Ann is reading what TPAC is all about 40 years from now, what should that say?
So I'm David Schwant, and actually I was just walking by the building and Karen asked me if I wanted to be on it. As you now know, I'm on the TPAC board. And Mark, that's a great question. All of this time I've been thinking, we live in an era where we are bombarded 24/7 with all the things that separate us, politically, ideologically, whatever it might be. The arts, I think, has the capacity to unify us, to bring us together. We all have our preferences, but not these deep-seated hatred that comes with all these other types of barriers. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity for a place like the island, where even if we have different cohorts, natives, transplants, summer folk, there's some ground that we can stand upon together and coalesce and elevate all of our lives. And people like us who are here tonight and who care about these things can have much greater impact than any one of us individually. And so that's one question I had before I answer yours, is how do we engender that kind of unity and not just thought, but action and movement, so that we can elevate the arts on the island because of its unifying potential. Now, you're talking about the TPAC, and there have been meetings where we've kicked around sort of taglines and things like that. One of them is where art meets island. And, but that's something that can apply to any art or cultural group that's activated here or currently acting on the island. A place like this, in my experience so far, has drawn all kinds of performances and events that have involved everybody on the island at some level. And I think, what a tremendous accomplishment that is. And all the people that have made that happen, all the funding that's been generously given. We have another saying that when you give, good things happen. And we've witnessed that. So I think TPAC is just yet another expression of what so many on this island have done to enrich the lives of everyone here. And it's what causes people to take up permanent residence and to retire here and to spend their money here, with all the impacts to commerce and everything else.
It's interesting, the words you just used there. TPAC is an expression of something, because I remember before this was built and having discussions about this place, and it's not unique to this project. It's happened in every venue that I've been involved with. The conversation initially starts out about what does this place look like as a performance site? It's a building, it's a location, it's about how many seats we have. And what you just said, I think, sort of answers the question that I was asking. And I think it's the question that's an important one for all of us as we think about the future, to understand that the arts and arts organizations are not just about what we do, it's about who we are. They are an expression of who we are. So whether I enjoy Julian singing or not, or the people he brings in, doesn't really matter, because TPAC as an institution, as an expression of who we are, as a means of bringing people together, matters to the island. I don't have to care about weaving one way or the other to understand that Seavers has done a tremendous service to the island, and the Art and Nature Center I worked there when I was in high school, and that's where I met Wilson Trufla, and it goes above and beyond whether I know what a garter snake is or a pine snake is or what's on the wall. And I think that point is, I think one of the things, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Deb, earlier about an arts board. It's not about an arts board to raise money. It's about an arts board that creates that awareness that the arts are an expression and that we have a seat at the table. And if we have a seat at the table, if we are doing good things, the money follows it. The money is the end result, it's the end of the conversation, not the starting point of the conversation. And so often we have problems because in this business, the floors are falling down and we need money. And it's hard to resist that urge to make it about the money right away. And I think the great opportunity is exactly as you said, David. How do we communicate that we are an expression of community values and community identity, and collectively we're the expression? The challenge, I think, on the community side, and this goes back to your point again, Deb, is how do we give guidance to the arts to develop policies that isn't just about, well, I like the nature center, so we're gonna give them money, but I like the nature center because it's involved in education or it speaks to who we are. And what are the policies that we should have to encourage the arts? Do we get the Chamber of Commerce to feature the arts more on the identity of the island? So, the reality is that if you look at tourism, people come to communities with a predetermined idea in their mind. They don't come very rarely, only the minority come because I want to see that show. They come because I have a good opinion of that place. And the arts shape that opinion that in turn gets someone to say, I think I'm going to look more closely at Washington Island as opposed to Sister Bay and spend my time here. And then the Art and Nature Center or an event at TPAC becomes the trigger and the excuse to come here. And so I think one of the challenges that the arts face is working with the chamber, working with the promotional people, working with Door County Tourism to not just promote individual events, but to promote that expression.
And I just want to jump a second, because one of the things I hate to have anybody do is go off and start another organization. So I'm going to put that out as a caution, but to your question, if there was a lunch for the arts people to come together and say, the why is we want to raise the profile of the arts and back to Mark's point, working with community. So we want you to come together and have a lunch and let's talk about this. Rather than saying we're going to get bylaws together, we're going to resurrect the Washington Island Arts Board. Maybe that's down the line. But I think the why is really bubbled up here tonight, and if that kind of event could take place, it's low stress to get involved. It has to be as inclusive as you can make it be. So as many artists should feel welcome as any organization feels welcome to come have that conversation. But I think that kind of event could get you to the point of having the conversations that answer Mark's question, which is, so now how do we connect back to the community? Well, here on the island, you're going to find you have a lot of connections already, right? Because you're a small place where everybody wears lots of hats. So if everybody was in the same room, you might find, oh, there's the connection there. We can talk that person into this particular idea. We've got another idea that can go this way. So again, low impact event, but I think it could be really explosive.
I wanted to just say, comment on what you just said. I was just thinking about this. I have a friend who says organizations don't have relationships, people do. And here on the island, I think that's so obvious because everybody knows Julian, right? Everybody knows Ann. People know each other here. And so when you think about the TPAC, you might think about Julian, or you think about the Art and Nature Center, you think about Laura, or you think about, my daughter, a lot of you know my daughter Claire, who worked in the nature room for like 3 or 4 years. People know each other personally. And I think that is a real strength of this community. And that is a real wonderful thing to build on. And for us to think about how do we extend that welcome to people who are new or just visiting so that we can not just pull in their money, but get them to care about, what happens in this community as well.
So on that note, let me ask one more question of the panel, and then we want to leave time in case anyone in the audience has observations, comments, or questions. But I want to go back to the young people on the island and education, because I was joking in that I haven't done anything different with my life than I did at the Red Barn, except I have shoes on tonight. Other than that, it's sort of, I'm still doing what I always did. And I found a career. I didn't know it at the time, but it goes back to what George said, $9 billion. Arts and culture and entertainment are one of the biggest industries in America, and we might think that we're isolated here now, but given internet connections, given what George was talking about earlier about creativity and imagination, how do we serve the schools? How do we serve the next generation? It's not about getting the students involved in what we do, but I'd love your thoughts on how the arts and culture can help build careers and open doors and open the imagination for careers for island students. Thoughts, comments?
I always have something.
Of course.
That's cool. Kevin might be shutting me off. I know within the theater here, we're trying to be facilitators and a conduit in essence to some of those very same things. And it's our second year, it's a pretty crazy learning curve, but we're doing a short film contest. And we did it with the school, and my sister Lila, it does help my sister Lila being a teacher there, because she made it part of her curriculum, and with Brian Mann's wife. So the kids had to work really hard, and they got some gift certificates and some money at the end. And so, and some of the kids said it was really fun, as usual. Some, I can't repeat what they said. That's all right. They have a comfort level, and we're trying to do other things like that with the young people. We're trying to think of things too, and I appreciate what you're talking about. We can be involved in anything that you come up with. I'd love to brainstorm with you over coffee someday. Yeah, I know Tom, who does the lights here, Tom Pratt, took one of the young students, he's 15 or 16 under his arm, or under whatever, and has been working with him in the lights now. He's become a paid employee of the TPAC, working on the lights, and he's so passionate. If our electric bill goes up, it's because him. He's in here just working on all these theaters and all these things, but it's just so he has such great passion for it. It's just really fun. So we're trying to individually and as an organization do the same. But we trust me, if you ever have any suggestions for what you see good or what I don't want to hear, that doesn't matter. Please let me know. I'm sure Deb is the same. We really want to be aware of things that we can do progressively and actively with young people or for older people. We have a show coming up with Fori and Foppy, which is the Friends of Rock and Plum and Pilot, and I'm not sure where that's going to go. The archives, we have Kenny. We're trying to take advantage of it. We have so many natural assets here also. Artistically, Kenny Coyne is going to do a thing on commercial fishing. It's his 50th plus year. But he's going to have his sons here who are younger, and like Jesse Hans, and they have great camaraderie. But and yeah, so anything you can suggest to us, and I'm sure Deb is any of the organizations, I hope will be open to that, or how we can work together. We just want to be available. So that's my part.
I'll mention artist in residence, I think, is a wonderful way for people who have a passion for fiber arts, for visual arts, for photography, or any of those things can meet with people anywhere. Right now at the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, I have maybe 3 or 4 gals sitting there spinning. And they've had a lot of questions and interaction, and it's just simple things like that can be done.
Okay, I'll use the opportunity to put a plug in for our upcoming events. We have our opening reception at the Art and Nature Center this Saturday from 4:30 to 6. and Art in the Park will be back on July 9th. So we are looking for volunteers for that, so you can sign up with me before you leave. Thanks.
Not only a float, but a recruitment pitch, I like that. So, as we're coming up on time, are there any thoughts, observations? Yeah.
Hi, we haven't really talked about the museums on the island. And being the manager of Jacobson's Museum, I'm into my second year now, I just wanted to kind of bring up that and how many people actually come through museums like Jacobson's, that there is somebody there, like me or my colleague, to talk to them and talk to them not just about what Jacobson's Museum is about, which I hope you know, but it's 91 years old this year. And it's just extraordinary, the sort of responses that you get from people coming in. Some who are they just think they're just going to motor on through, and then they start to hear the story of why it's there and the vision of James Jacobson. And some people, it's not 100%, but some people have a real kind of revelation. This afternoon, as part of Door County History Days, which is, we just joined the Heritage Alliance of Door County, which is a loose group of history organizations in Door County. And we had Jeannie Hutchins, who was a docent for 23 years in the museum. We had over 150 people through the museum, and people were in tears because they've seen Jeannie over the years, and they didn't know she was going to be there today, but they were there with their children and their grandchildren, and they were having a similar experience to what they had before. Sorry, I'm a bit full of it now, but I just wanted to say, because we haven't really, and we've got the Maritime Museum, people keep on asking about that. I'm going to try and help so that we can get it open for at least part of each week. But these are things that are talking about the history of the island and the past culture of the island, and the Scandinavian immigrants that came to the island. And we haven't really touched on that. We've kind of skirted on it, but I just wanted to pitch that in. And I'm a complete newbie, so.
I love your comments, and they're so important because I think they're so illustrative of some of the key points that we need to take away from this. I mean, you talked about joining the Heritage Alliance. It's the idea that as institutions, and this is kind of the point that George was making, there are resources out there, and we are part of a much larger sector. And so thinking beyond the walls of our institution. The other thing that I think is so important, and it goes to David's comment about expression, when you talked about people hear the story, you didn't once mention the objects, and so often we get caught up in museums and think of them as a storage place for objects, and those objects are really the excuse to illustrate a story, to tell the story, and when you said Jens Jacobson, I mean, it's not just a generic story, it's a specific vision. And so I think that really does speak to the power of the arts. Everything that you said speaks to what we've been talking about tonight, about how this builds community. It's about relationships between people. It's about a sense of identity. It's about people walking away from the island feeling connected with the community, as opposed to, I saw a bunch of old things in a building. And I think you've captured the importance of why the arts matter and how, as arts organizations moving forward, we need to think about things on the island. So we're not just isolated storerooms of objects, but we're connected with the Heritage Alliance. We're aware that we're telling the stories, and that sense of self-awareness of what we mean as institutions is one of the first steps that we have to take to be relevant in the future. Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts?
It just struck me about having a museum tour, because we have the Farm Museum and the Jacobson Museum and the Maritime Museum and the Architecture Center. If you had a knowledgeable guide who could take a group of people not too big, and you could make a morning of it or a day of it, because I have yet to go to the Farm Museum. I really haven't been to the Jacobson Museum, but if I had a knowledgeable guide who could help me get the most from those venues, that would be pretty nifty.
Everyone's got their marching orders there, that's it.
Put it out to the universe, it'll be fun, I sign up.
It's not only fun, but it also tells a more comprehensive story. Again, instead of just being focused on one dimension, you know, like Julia was saying, there's, you know, now you tie that with the archives where Kenny's talking about 50 years of fishing, and you go to the museum and you understand what was happening at the same time. Yeah. Yes.
Considering this is about the future, there's exciting things happening at the school in terms of art. The tech ed room is being developed, there's a metals room that's being developed, and the art that lies within those machines waiting to be brought out by the students is going to be astounding. But the community, especially the arts community, needs to support the school in that endeavor. We're in the process of budgeting it right now. So think about the school, support the school. In a related thing, we have one of the best teachers, I think, right down below here. Innovative, the Sea Perch, their robotic vehicle, 4th in the world, 14th in the world. So whatever anybody can do to support a teacher like that is very important for the arts.
Absolutely, because you said it right. It's the art that's going to come out of the machines. The machines are machines. They can basically do what is asked of them. And these students, if they're getting in at the early grades, by the time they're in high school, imagine what they're going to be able to create with these machines. But it takes excellent teachers, it takes the machines, but it takes the resources and the support of the community for that. So I just want to underscore it, and thank you for that comment.
Can I just speak to that too?
Yeah.
It struck me when George said that you can expect more from the students than you think, or however you said it, I'm not quoting you, but which brought back the memory to me of, back to the Red Barn, is that the leaders, the adults in the community at that time, gave the young people a space and basically said, what is your vision? Figure it out and do it. And they were hands off, for the most part. I'm sure there were a few moments where they had to step in, but not much. And so what struck me is that we want to provide these opportunities for our students and give them the ownership. And that's what Miranda tries to do with the work that she does on the projects that she does in our school. So I just wanted to put that out into this community to say, our kids can do a whole lot, and probably more than we typically think, or maybe we're afraid to give them that responsibility and let them just have at it. And then added to that, I just would say, if you do, or if we do decide to have some sort of gatherings where we begin to explore this topic further, including those students is huge. And really giving them a sense that they're not just being invited to listen. You know, they might be uncomfortable talking, but they are a key ingredient to those conversations. You know, I wish some of them were here tonight to hear this kind of discussion, begin to understand the direction that you all are, you know, that we're talking about here tonight. But more of those kinds of opportunities where the kids can be present would just be very important.
And it would be great if one of these opportunities, when the arts groups and the artists are gathering, took place at the school where they could see the kids, the work that they've done, the machines that they're working on, and the possibilities there. As one of the things we often say to arts groups is, when you're having a meeting, include the arts. It seems like that should be pretty basic, but it's not. You know, they get right down to business and they get past it. But there should always be somebody singing, somebody demonstrating, whatever. And in this particular instance, you've got a really interesting thing that's been brought up here, which would be a great place to gather, learn about some resource that maybe you know about, maybe you don't, and how the kids are excited about what they're learning through that. So just look up.
One of the things that strikes me about the comments just now too, it goes to the idea of breaking down boundaries and how language can get in the way. So, you know, we think of it as, oh, that's metalworking tools, that's a shop, as opposed to applying a different label to it, and thinking about it differently, and realizing that that is part of the arts and culture. And once we start applying different language, and like you said, Maggie, when we get the students involved, and as George said, you know, bringing them in part of that discussion, because one of the things that as we're listening, as I'm listening to the comments, that it just really makes me aware of is that we sometimes follow slavishly models from off the island. It's like, well, this is what a theater and a performing arts center is supposed to look like, so we give it that label, and then we have to build it that way, as opposed to what do we really need, or arts organizations are supposed to look like this, they're supposed to be an independent nonprofit. And I was, you know, struck by the comment about, well, wait a minute, you know, if I'm a visitor, I don't see it as a farm museum, a fishing museum, a Jacobson museum. I see that as a collection of museums that tell me about the island. So why do we insist on these artificial boundaries? And I know myself, it's, yes, the island limits our perspective sometimes, but on the other hand, I got to meet people. I got the career that I got because I got to meet people that I would not meet in a more formal school situation. And so instead of seeing these as limitations that, well, we don't have the metalworking and shop programs that bigger schools have, or we don't have all the bigger formal organizations like you said, Julian, and like you, Ann, we're talking about the artists in residence. Kids here on the island can meet nationally known fiber artists that they never ever get to meet in another school. So how do we break free of those limitations that we set ourselves and realize the opportunity? Because again, this speaks to economic development, that for people with young families to be able to move to a place that has the benefits of the island and to be able to connect with nationally known fiber artists, or, you know, I look at Minneapolis, it's a big thing when students in our schools get to connect with one of the minor cast members in one of our shows. And here at TPAC, you know, Julian can bring a headliner over to the school and say, here, they're gonna spend an hour with you playing guitar. I mean, that is really astounding stuff. And I think it's, as we start looking to the future, looking at those assets that we have instead of the limitations is going to be really important. Oh, yes.
I just wanted to say that, being summer people, we wait for the Observer to come, because all winter long, we wanna know what's happening, and my favorite part is to find out what's happening in schools. I get really emotional, I think about what you've done with those kids this year, and in the arts, what Mel has done with all of her hard work, and it's really important, that keeps us connected, but then we don't know what to do with it. Okay, we read about it, we get excited about it, but then it's summer. So we're not here, but we support you and we are very excited about the kinds of things that are happening in schools.
That's a really important comment, because it points to two other issues that we really haven't addressed here. Is one, the Observer as part of that cultural ecosystem. It's not just the groups that produce it, but how do we communicate that? And I love the point that you made, though, and this might be something that we all have to think of more, is answering the question, so what? What do we do with all this? As a result of this, what is supposed to happen? How do we make people aware of the results from doing this? You know, we always talk about this concert or these student performance or these students at a master class, but we don't talk about what happened 3 years later or 3 months later or 3 weeks later. So that's a good point. We need to be more aware of how we talk about this, and the Observer plays a really important role. Having said that, I just personally want to thank the Observer and Karen for this opportunity, and not just about the arts, but the forum in general, and for what the Observer is doing for the island. Because as someone who grew up here, continues to be here, understands why this place matters so deeply, thinking about what we mean, where we're going in the future is really important. These kind of forums are what create the life of the community. So I want to thank the Observer. I also want to really thank my colleagues, friends, fellow alums, Mariana and George and Olivia, who's not here, for sharing with us and taking the trouble to come up to the island and be here with us tonight. And then, of course, everyone on the panel for not only being here tonight, but for walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So thank you, everyone, and look forward to the future. Thank you.
Coming, as we have said before, this is really a beginning of looking forward and show what you choose to do with this afterwards. We certainly would like to report in the Observer, but I think there were a lot of wonderful ideas here that came out, and I hope that in some form they will be taken forward, and they certainly will be included in any town comprehensive plan that we do, because to me, the arts and culture on the island are so unique, and it has to continue in very much the same way. And I also want to thank Emily Small, our reporter, who's here tonight. Much to be said in this discussion, and also finally to the tech group up there. I can't see who's up there tonight. Thank you, and to the keypad for allowing us to host these discussions and for being such an important part of the cultural community. And thank you all for